In this tutorial, what we're going to do is take a look at how to attempt the week 5 tasks on PyGame. So what we're going to have a little go at today then is working with images. And when you have images in games, we tend to refer to those as sprites. And I'm going to use this little guy here. This is the logo for a graphics program. And I'm going to use him as an image, which I'm going to try and make move around a little bit in the PyGame window. So the first step today is going to be to grab ourselves a fresh copy of the template, which has got some of the code in it that we're going to need. So I'm just going to right click on that. Here I am in Firefox, save link as. Then what I'm going to do is browse into my H drive, into my computer science folder, year 9, PyGame, here I am. And what I'm going to do is, I'm going to rename it actually, I'm going to call it week 5 template like that, so that I can always find it again later on, and I'm going to save that. What I've also got opened up is I've got PyGame open. So in PyGame, I'm going to go File and Open. And again, I'm then going to browse. So it starts you off, always starts you off somewhere a bit odd. So if I go right up to the top like this, I'll fold up my C drive because I don't want to be in there. It quite often puts you in there. Look, so I'm going into H. There it is, Computer Science, year 9. And a bit more scrolling, and PyGame, there it is. And you could either actually click on the folder or the file itself. I'm going to click on the file itself, week 5 template, and double click, and that brings it up. So here's my code just here, and just to run it for the very first time, just to make sure that everything's going to work today, I'm just going to start, just got to do this once, I'm just going to start by clicking on run, scrolling down and clicking on run just here like that, and it'll say what would you like to run, because I've had quite a few things open. You can see that here, and the bit I actually want is this week 5 template, so I can just double click on that. So the computer will have a little bit of a think, and after a moment or two I'll get my PyGame window, which is here, which is a big empty black window. So now we're all good to get started. So as long as you get to that point, you'll be fine. So let's take a look at the tasks on the page. What we're going to try and do then is we're going to basically ask the image, a little logo that we want, to chase the mouse pointer around the screen. And what I'd like really is for the image to be kind of on the middle of the mouse pointer, and we'll try and work towards that. So the process to handle that in PyGame can be expressed just like you see on the notes just here. The first thing we'll need to do is to load the image we want into the computer's memory, because it's currently stored, it's currently on the web, you'll need to save it actually. What we'll also need to do is make a variable that's going to hold whereabouts we want to draw our sprite in terms of its x and y coordinates, just like you'd see in a maths lesson. And then once that's all loaded up, we need to do that once. Once that's loaded up, we can then start a little loop. And the process for a loop will be to set the x and y coordinates for our image, so we'll see whereabouts the mouse is in terms of its x and y coordinates, and we'll then use that and display the image on the screen at that particular point. So that's the way that that's going to work. And the process of painting the screen, so you can use the lingo, is called bit blitting, or blit as we say when we want to paint the screen. And by painting the screen about 30 or 40 times per second, it'll give the illusion of the image being nice and moving around smoothly after the mouse pointer. So let's actually start to write some code to do that. Before we get onto that then, I'm going to need to grab a copy of the image that I want, which is back up here in the page. And as it does say on the notes as well, you're going to need to save this. So I'm going to right click on the image that I want, go down to Save Image As, and very nicely actually, the computer's already pointing me into my H drive, into Computer Science, Year 9, PyGame, and I'm going to save my image in there. To be a little bit neat and tidy, I think what I'm also going to do today is I'm going to make a new folder. So I'm just right clicking in this empty space, going to New, and then Folder, and I'm going to call that folder Images, because if I ended up in a game with lots and lots of different image resources, it'd start to get really cluttered. So this will just make it a little bit neater, a little bit tidier. So I'm going to go into that Images folder, and I'm going to save that. It's called GIMP2. GIMP is the name of the graphics package we'll use later on. I'm just going to leave it called that and click on Save. So back to some code then. So the first part of what we wanted to do was to load our image into memory and then create somewhere to hold whereabouts we're going to paint our image on the screen. And the way we do that in code is with these two lines just here. And if we have a little look at what we've got before we copy and paste it, we've said here player1image equals. So that's creating a variable called player1image. And what we're saying is that into that variable, what we want to do is to place an image which we're going to load, and then we can give it the location of the file in question. So that's that bit. And on the next line, if we look at that, it says player1 xy equals 100 100, and that's something called a list actually. And what it's doing is it's holding just the number 100 twice. And this will be the x position on the screen, and this will be the y position on the screen. So let's grab that code and copy it. And according to the instructions, it's so I can add these lines under line 27 in the code. So let's have a look for line 27. Well, at the moment, line numbers are turned off. They normally appear in this space just here, but you can turn them on very easily by right-clicking in this thin grey column here, just turning on Show Line Numbers. And here we are, sure enough, line number 27. So I'm going to pop that code in just here. Let's place that just there. I don't think it should be line 27. I've just changed my mind. I'm going to call it line 17, which is I'm pretty sure what I meant to say. There we go. That'll be fixed on the resources when you look at it. So, so I've loaded up the image and I've got somewhere to store it. So this is just happening the first time I run through the program. Okay, what's next? Well, the next thing I want to do, according to my pseudocode algorithm, is to repaint the screen. Now, because I don't want to use that logo like a sort of a big paintbrush to draw it everywhere, I'll need to clear whatever was on the screen at first. So I'll set the entire screen to be filled up with black. And then what I'll do is I'll say that player1, another variable, is going to be equal to a blit, a draw, actually load the image onto the screen. And what I'd like to load up is player1 image, which is this thing. We set this up earlier, this picture file here. And I want that to appear at these XY coordinates. So 100 pixels across, 100 pixels down from the top left corner. So I'm going to grab these two lines just here and copy. And this time, oh sorry, I was right by the way, look, that goes under line 16 and this one goes under line 27. Anyway, that's copied and I'm going back onto here, scrolling down the way, and I'm going to pop that and paste it into position just here. Now, because this is part of a loop, because this is part of a set of instructions that are repeated over and over again, I can't leave this code glued to this left-hand margin like this. It'll confuse the computer. So I'm just going to make sure I use the tab key to bring that in, and I'm going to use the tab key to bring that in like that. I'm actually going to tab it in twice, like that. There's one other thing I need to do as well here, which is something that again has just occurred to me as I'm making this tutorial, which is this. I've said that the picture that I want to load is called gimp2.png. That is the name of the picture file, but let's think for a second about where the picture is. So if I look in my H drive, in my computer science, in my year 9, in my PyGame, I've got week 5 template, which is the file I'm working on at the moment, but then I actually put the image inside this images folder just here. So what I suggest you do is either put the image in the same folder as here, or if you want to be neat and tidy like me, make an images folder, but just remember in your code to put in here images / like that before you run the program, and it'll tell it to look in the images folder, and that's where it'll find GIMP2. Right, let's give that a run and see how we did. Okay, so what that's done then is that's loaded the image, and it's moved 100 pixels across, and it's moved 100 pixels down to about here, and it's loaded the image from that point onwards. So the image is here. So the coordinates that we give to draw this image on are basically going to be the top left corner of the image itself. So far so good, but we wanted to track the mouse. We need it to sort of chase the mouse around a little bit, and at the moment it's always appearing at position 100, 100. We need to try and work on that. So let's see if we can improve this and make it a little bit better. Well, one of the things that PyGame gives us the ability to do is to pick the location on the screen of where the mouse is at any point in time and to store its X and Y coordinate. So what I think we'll do is we're going to pick up these two lines. Let's have a look at what we've got here. This one says that the mouse position, new variable, is going to be the position of the mouse in the PyGame window. That's the way I would read that code. And then in my next line, I say that player1xy, which is a variable we set up before. Originally, it was worth 100, 100. It's 100 pixels across, 100 pixels down. But what we're saying now instead is that I'd like it to be worth whatever the x position, that's what we call this, whatever the x position of the mouse is, and whatever the Y position of the mouse is. And that can constantly change, so it'll give us the ability to track the mouse around. Let's pick those lines up and let's paste them in. So those are going to go just underneath the lines we had previously. And this will need to be tabbed in, like that. So hopefully now what we'll have is a slightly more interesting program. Let's have a look. So as you can see, as I move the mouse around, it's constantly redrawing it based on where the mouse is. So I've got that. But this isn't perfect. We've still got an issue, which is that the image itself is being drawn as we've asked for. It's being drawn from the tip of the mouse pointer and then down and to the right. But really, I want my mouse pointer slap bang in the middle of my image. So let's take a second and explore how we can do that. Try and understand the maths that's going to be needed to make that work. So what I've done is I've created a little image to have a look at as a discussion point. Okay, so at the moment what's happening is something a lot like you're seeing in this photo. Here's my mouse pointer, it is placed just here, and then the image file is being drawn around that. You can see that the left and the right edges. In order to make it so that that mouse pointer sits where that red circle is, just here, what I effectively need to do is to tell the computer to look at where that mouse pointer is, but then to move left a little bit, and to move up a little bit, and then to draw the picture at that point down. I've got a Paint, I think, opened here as well. It might trouble to make the point. So here's me with my my mouse pointer. And so again, what I want to do is to get that rectangle there, but I want that drawn so that it starts left a bit, up a bit, and then I draw the image. And if I draw it that way, it'll always sit dead center on the mouse pointer, and that will be a lot more helpful. So how do we do that? Well, if you think about what you've got here at the moment, thinking about the coordinates, just like you would in a maths lesson, we've got an X and a Y position. Let's just look at X for a second. Well, at the moment, when I look at the image, if I think about how much I needed to move over to the left, I needed to move left by about half the width of this picture, like this, just here. And if it does that, then that will work really well. So what's the X position of this point just here? How can we find that really precisely? If this is a maths question, how would we tackle that? Well, let's look at what distances we do know. In this example that I've dreamt up just here with my mouse fixed here, the mouse position for X is 120 pixels from the edge of the screen. Okay, that's 120. So if I said that I want my X position to be there, I'd be exactly where I am now, but I don't. I want it to be left a little bit. So it's going to be this amount minus a certain amount. But how much should that be? Well, what else do I know? I know from my image, because I've asked PyGame to work this out for me, I've asked PyGame to pick up the image's width, okay, which is this thing just here. And that width is 100 pixels. So if I took that image at 100 pixels and divided it back by 2, that would be 50 pixels, which is halfway across. And I could take that 50 pixels away from this 120, which would take me back here somewhere, like that, and that would fix it for the X position. So my X position actually should be 120, take away half of 100. And that would work. The same idea also works for the Y position as well. So again, I've set here in this example, I've said that the amount on Y is going to be 90 pixels from top of the screen to just here. I've also said, I'll scroll this down slightly, I've also said that this image is 100 pixels tall as well, so half of that's 50, and I can take that 50 away from 90, which tells me that overall it should be 40 pixels from the top of the screen. So that gives me a new improved set of XY coordinates. So how do we actually make that work in terms of code? Well, before we get to that point, what's probably a good idea is to take the image that we've got and to fix the size of it and to actually make it a particular size relative to our screen. So we're going to grab a couple of lines of code first to make the image so it's a known size. I'm going to make it 80 pixels wide and 60 pixels tall by using these two lines just here. And because I don't need to resize the image once it's been done, I can do this before I start my game loop. So I'm going to grab this code, copy it, come up to the top of the program, just here should do it, and I'm going to paste that in just here. Okay, so when the program was first loaded up, I'm going to transform my image, this image here in particular, and make it this size, 80 by 60 pixels. That's our first step. If I run it at this point, you'll notice now actually that my image has shrunk in size. There it is. It looks a little bit squashed and a bit skew-if as well. I could perhaps rescale that later on. Back to the task at hand then, about trying to center up that mouse pointer. So, as we've all just talked about, the new X position can be decided mathematically here and here, and there's the example that I just talked through a second ago. So you can take a look on the notes and read through that for yourself. You'll need to be able to understand this to be able to do the task, so don't worry if you have to rewind and watch the video again or reread the notes a couple of times before you get it. Once you do understand it, you'll find it's not quite as bad as you perhaps first thought. In terms of making this work as code then, we need these lines of code down the page just here. Alright, and so what we're going to do is we're going to replace the lines of code we've got on line 32, which is this, with these 3 lines just here instead. So I'm going to highlight these, copy them, keyboard shortcut Control-C, or you can right click and go copy, whichever you prefer. Go down to around about line 32, here it is, on mine it's actually line 33, I hit enter a couple of times, look, here it is, here's the line though, and I'm going to take that line out, that's deleted, I'm going to paste this line in, and then use the tab key to take it into the page. So, let's try running that program again now and see how we get on. Okay. So, if you look now, as I move my mouse around, the mouse pointer now is always sat dead center. I know sometimes it lags by a second or two, but it always catches up. But it's now lined up, so it always sits dead center on top of my mouse pointer. Now that's going to be really important, because when we start to make our games, we start looking at things like collisions, it's going to be important that the actual graphics do touch where we want them to touch before different interactions happen in their games. Otherwise it spoils the illusion of the way the game works, and it won't play out quite as nicely. So, once we've covered that, what you can now do is take a little look at the badge tasks for yourself. To collect a silver badge for this particular task, all you need to do is to go through the code that we've done today, so that's the lines of code that sit just here, and the lines of code that now sit in here. I wish I'd tap that in a bit. Now the lines of code that sit just here, look. And what I want you to do is to write a comment after each one of these lines explaining exactly what it does. I'm not going to do this for you, this is why it's a badge task, but on the screen fill black one you might say paint the entire screen black. And then you'll let you do the more complex ones for yourself. So that's the silver badge task. To get the gold badge task, what I'd like you to do is to have a little look at this sprite down here below. We've got a nice little picture of a bird, and what I want you to do is to modify your program so that rather than being the GIMP program logo, it instead uses the bird. The bird's a different size, it's got a slightly different aspect ratio, so you're going to need to fiddle around with those numbers that we played with in our transform code, just here. You need to play around with those to get something that looks about right. Okay, and what I'd also like you to do as well is to put together a little text file and just explain why it might be a good idea to store things for images like X and Y size in variables rather than writing the actual sizes and hard coding those numbers in, as we said before. That's the gold task. The final thing I'd like to do, if you manage to do those, is to be a little bit more ambitious and to use the GIMP program, which is a graphics program that's installed on the computers. You'll be able to find it under the Start menu. And what I'd like to do is to use GIMP to cut out one of these images just here from the sprite sheets that are below. And you'll need to research how to use something called an alpha layer. And again, you'll have to find out what that means and see if you can use that for your player image instead. And I'll see you in the next tutorial.